Okay, so very good evening to each one of you on behalf of Symbiosis Statistical Institute, Symbiosis International University, all my staff members, students, alumni, and most importantly, the cultural committee, events committee, and we also do have the IKS committee members. I welcome each one of you to this very special session, which we have organized for you on a very auspicious day as we celebrate Navratri, and today is the Vijayadashmi. So as all of you know that we launched this series of sessions right under the heritage and culture, forts and fortification. So this is second session in a series where we are going to understand about the terminology of the sports of the forts. Last time we understood the geographical importance, how forts are getting built up, and then what is the geographical importance of the forts when it comes to when it comes to building up these kind of things. What were the vision of all these great people? Similarly, in today's session, I'm very happy that Parag Levi has again accepted our invitation and he is around to apprise us on the what are the terminology when it comes to the forts in India or in general. So I am very sure that you will definitely like this session, and then whenever we are visiting all these forts, I know, I mean, so many of my students are very interested in trekkings and visiting the forts. Then in that case, I'm very sure that this kind of sessions or the series of these kind of sessions will be really helpful for all of them. So I'm completely aware that apart from my own students from Symbiosis Statistical Institute, we have circulated this particular session details to all other colleges, and some of the students and the members from the other colleges are also going to join, or they might have joined this particular session. So I welcome each one of you, and without further ado, I think I should hand it over to Parag, I mean, who we are very keen to listen to. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Shukla, madam. Good afternoon to one and everyone who has joined the online lecture on fort terminology, or we call it as Durga Paribhasha in our own language. Actually, this is the second lecture in the online series of Heritage Culture, Forts and Fortification, being organized by a statistical wing of Symbiosis Institution at Pune. I am privileged and honored to be associated with this esteemed organization, and I am thankful to Shukla madam for giving me this opportunity to talk on the various aspects of forts and fortification. Actually, in the last lecture, if you remember, we did talk about the forts, their origin, and various references in the ancient Indian literature and treatises. We studied about the classification of forts, and then on most important topic of that lecture was, of course, the genius of fort architecture, Chhatrapati Shri Shivaji Maharaj. His legacy of art of fortification, the various fort defense mechanisms he brought into actual reality for making the forts formidable and impregnable to his enemy. Now, going forward in today's lecture, we are going to understand the various parts of forts or the fortification, and what was the role of these parts in making the defense lines of the inhabitants very strong and elusive for an invader. The medieval fortification of India is practically innumerable in numbers. There are hundreds of these fortifications scattered about throughout the subcontinent. The medieval fortifications of India in terms of military architecture are quite different from the fortification as it has been observed in Europe and Western countries. Now the important factors in the design of fort architecture should be that they should impress the observer or the enemy with their imposing and formidable structures. So this is the basic requirement of a fortification, that it should impress the enemy with its formidable structures. It, as well as it should express the power of the ruler. The power of the ruler should be conveyed to the invader, that the whoever is defending has got a power to defend the entire stronghold. So the basic fundamentals of creating a fortification are two, as we discussed right now. Now, the striking feature in this fortification is that the tall and massive walls, the towers, designed on medieval concepts, were being built in India up to the middle of 18th century. That is during the Maratha period, of course.
Parag,
Yeah.
if I may interrupt you, you wish to put up the slides?
I will start. Just a minute. I will start.
Okay.
Now, let us begin with our fortification presentation, and then you will come to know one by one. We will see how it is being done now. I will just share the presentation. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Just a minute. I will make it a full screen. Is it okay now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let us begin with the port terminology presentation. And as I mentioned, we are going to understand the Durga Paribhasha, or the various terminology that is used in the monuments or while building the forts, what terminology is used. So let us start with that. Now, the first slide, as you can see over here, we need to know the primary functions of a fort. Before we move ahead to the actual monuments or the structures on the fort, let us understand the primary functions of a fort. Now, the forts were built primarily for two reasons. During the peacetime, the administration and control over the surrounding, that was the main objective of building a fort. As we are aware, a hill fort, for example, has an advantage of height, as it can keep a vigil and control over a large area from the top. Now, this is the requirement of a fort during a peacetime. Now, what happens when a warlike situation? During a warlike situation, forts used to be a center of all military activities. As we know, if you have studied the Maratha history, you must be knowing that during Shivaji Maharaja's period, all the military activities were centered around the forts. So, apart from defending the garrison, it used to give a shelter and cover to the people in the surrounding areas. So this is the main aspect of building a fort. During peacetime, it used to give a shelter to the, during the peacetime, it used to control the entire region. And during a warlike situation, it used to give, it used to defend the garrison, as well as it used to give shelter to the surrounding people. Now, based on these primary functions, forts were built in Europe, in the Western countries, as well as in the Indian subcontinent. As I mentioned earlier, in the Indian subcontinent, there are numerous fortifications today also visible, and those can be seen also. Now, when we talk about Maharashtra, as we mentioned earlier in the last lecture, there are various types of forts. Now, if you want to know the exact number of types of forts being discussed in our old literature, there are 19 types of forts which have been elaborated in our ancient literature. Out of these 19 types of forts, as on today also, you can see 4 to 5 different types of forts. Now, what are these 4 to 5 different types of forts? Those can be visited as on today also in Maharashtra. The number one is Giri Durga, or the hill fort. Then comes your land fort, or the also it is called as Thala Durga. Then the Jala Durga island fort, surrounded from all sides by water. Then comes the Vanadurga forest fort. And the last one, which is a very unique and unique type of fort, it is called as the combination fort, or Mishra Durga in our language. Now, what is a Mishra Durga? The best example of Mishra Durga is Devgiri, being a combination of a land fort, ground fort, as well as a hill fort. Another example I would like to give you, which is a very common example to those who visit Alibag. On the Alibag seashore, there is one famous fort which is known as Kulaba Fort, or Alibag Fort. Now, Kulaba Fort near Alibag is another example of this combination fort. During high tide, this fort is surrounded by water from all the sides. And in low tide, when the water level recesses, we can even walk down to the fort from the coastline. So during low tide, it becomes a land fort. And during high tide, it is an island fort. So it is a combination of a land fort as well as an island fort. So this is nothing but a Mishra Durga. So in the context of our discussion, As far as Maharashtra is concerned, you can have 4 to 5 different types of forts. Now, Shivaji Maharaj, the contribution of Shivaji Maharaj, as in the last lecture also we discussed, he has got a unique contribution in reviving the nomenclature of art of fortification. This is very important. What he did, he asked one of his Sardars, Raghunath Pant Hanmante, to design and devise a Sanskrit nomenclature for fort terminology. What was the idea? The idea was to replace the Persian words that were being used in those times. Later on, Raghunath Pant did create a dictionary of 1,380 words called as Rajya Vyavahar Kosh, comprising of a Sanskrit chapter on fort terminology. This is very important. So Raghunath Panta Hanmante, he created Rajya Vyavahar Kosh, which consisted of a separate chapter on the fort terminology, and the various words being used in this chapter were all Sanskrit words, replacing the Persian words which were being used in those times. So this is a very unique contribution of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And just to give you an example how the Persian language was dominant over and was prevailing in the administration during those periods, I would like to give you some examples. We generally say Killa for Durga. General word for Sanskrit word is Durga, but we call it as Killa. In our normal terms, in our normal language, we call it as Killa. But just remember that this Killa is not a Marathi word or a Hindi word. It's a Persian word. Shivaji Maharaj, as I mentioned, he made a separate Rajya Vyavahar Kosh for replacing these Persian words, and he called Killa as Durga, a Sanskrit word for it. Then Bale Killa is another term which we use commonly in our fort terminology. Bale Killa can be further divided into Balai Killa. It is a Persian word. Killa means fort and Bala means the topmost portion. Topmost portion of the fort is called as Bale Killa. Or in English language, in English terminology, it is called as a citadel. Now, Shivaji Maharaj or Raghunath Panta Hanmante used another word. He said, Bale Killa should be called as Adhityaka. Then Machi is nothing but a plateau just below the citadel or the Bale Killa. He replaced the word Machi with the Sanskrit word and called it as Upatyaka. Then Khandak means moat. Moat is around the periphery of the fort. As you are all aware, you must have visited Devgiri Fort. You must have visited, some of you must have gone to Vellore Fort, Ahmednagar Fort. There you see, all these forts are land forts or ground forts, and they have in common moat around it on the periphery. So this moat was called as Khandak. But Shivaji Maharaj or Raghunath Panta Hanmante in particular, he devised a new word for it, and they started calling it as Parikha. Another word, Reuni. Reuni is nothing but a glacis. Glacis is the slope of the fort, which is just outside the curtain wall and adjacent to the moat. It was called as Reuni in Persian language. So he devised a beautiful word, Parikha Valayam. So these are the few words which I wanted to quote you. Just wanted to tell you how Shivaji Maharaj devised a new dictionary for this fort terminology. And this is a great contribution in reviving the entire culture of Indian fortifications. Now, moving to the next slide, let us now talk about the forts in Europe or Western countries. Europe does not have many hill forts like in India or in Maharashtra, but you find more of castles or the fortified palaces there. You will be astonished to note that in Maharashtra alone, you can find 500 different types of small or big forts. But in France alone, the number is 20,000, 22,000 castles. In France alone, you can find 22,000 castles. So this is a very huge number of castles. The most important of us, or the aspect of these European castles, is not the number, is the quality, how they are maintained. You can see the pictures. They are maintained in good shape and beautifully preserved. So important witnesses of their history and culture, they have preserved in very good shape, and they know the importance of this history. And of course, as against that, contradictory to that, in case of Maharashtra or particularly in India, the due attention, except a few, is not given to our forts by the government as well as by the society in general. And that is why today all these forts, which are the part of our history, which are witness to our glorious past, they are in what I would say a dilapidated and neglected state. So this is something about the French castles which I wanted to tell you how they are beautifully maintained. And as I mentioned you, there are in France alone. France is a very small country. In France alone, there are 22,000 castles which are beautifully maintained, and you can see the pictures over here. Now, let us come to the fourth terminology matrix. Here, I want to tell you, I want to show you on the left side, you can see the English words, English terminology. On the other side, right side, you have the Indian words. Most of these words have been, what I would say, devised and designed by, derived by Shivaji Maharaj in his Rajya Kosh. Some of the words, some of the aspects or some of the features have been mentioned in Kautilya's Arthashastra also. Now, the main objective of building of a fort is nothing but a protection. To make it functional and effective, various military architectures are built on it. Now, the requirements of these defensive structures vary with location of these forts. That is, if a hill fort, if it is a land fort, and it is a island fort, the structures will differ. Also, the size and the number of garrison inside, and most importantly, the purpose. Why? What is the purpose of building a fort? All these factors play a major role in deciding and creating these defense structures. These defense structures or parts of a fort are broadly referred to as fort terminology or nomenclature of defense structures. In Sanskrit, we call it as Durga Paribhasha, and the matrix, entire matrix. Of course, this is not the full and final, I would say. These are some of the terms which I would like to share with you. And out of that, few we'll discuss in detail also. So there are a number of terms which are there, but the important terms I am displaying over here, and the parallel words also in our language are given. So here is a matrix of glossary of terms used in fort terminology. Now, this has been very well defined. The English terminology, or in English or the Western countries, this terminology has been very well defined and elaborated in the European countries, and to some extent in our India by Shivaji Maharaj. You need to remember that the Western terminology or the English terminology is mainly associated with the castles. And what are the castles? Castles are nothing but the fortified palaces. They are not hill forts. And in our case, we have got the maximum number of hill forts in Maharashtra, right? So some of the terms do not have references in our architecture, in our own architecture. For example, here you can see in the partisan. Partisan doesn't have a parallel word in our Indian terminology. But sometimes you see some few of the words which are of Indian origin. For example, just below the table, you can see Charya, Fanji, Sherhaji, Gomukhi Darwaza, Machi, Upatyaka, Met. These are the words which are purely of Indian origin, and you don't find any mention in the English terminology. So these are the examples of the fort terminology and different types of the phrases which are being used. The Sher Haji, the Fanji, that in fact we are going to discuss it in detail. In the last lecture, if you remember, we had discussed about Gomukhi Darwaza, which was invented by Shivaji Maharaj and which today also can be seen in the fort of Raigad. Whenever you visit, you enter through the main gate, which is of a typical type of a Gomukhi Darwaza or a typical type of a Gomukhi style of fortification. To our surprise, many of these terms, as I mentioned earlier, are found in Kautilya's Arthashastra. Now, moving to the next slides, here is a typical diagram or a schematic diagram of a European castle. Now, you can see over here in the picture, you can see a gate is there. There is a pathway, and there is, of course, a moat around the periphery, which is very essential. Now, to enter this moat, you have a drawbridge. It can be closed. It can be, whenever you want to enter, it is to be opened. And once a insider enters the castle, the door is closed. You have towers. Towers can be seen over here. And there is one phrase which is commonly seen with the moat and bailey and moat type of fort castles. Bailey is nothing but an open courtyard inside the castle. Now here you can see the battlement, the word battlements. Battlements are nothing but the type of the augmented defense mechanisms which are used for the gateways building. Then defensive towers, gate towers, gate houses. So these are the basic curtain wall. Curtain wall, in our term, we call it as tatabandi, or it is the exterior wall of a castle or a fort. So this is the basic, I would say, a schematic diagram of a castle, and the basic parts have been basic parts have been described in it. Now we move on to our own model. In our model, of course, this is a model for a what I would say a ground fort. Here again, you can see a Mahadarwaza, the main entrance to the fort. The blue line is nothing but the moat or the khandak or the parikha. Then this is the drawbridge. This is the rampart, means tatabandi. Buruz means bastion. There is a window, gavaksha we call it as, or we call it as khidki. Then balekilla, it should be called as adhityaka in our own terminology. Then machi means upatyaka, the plateau just below the topmost portion of the fort. Then comes the jangya, charya. These are the very typical of the words, and these have parallel words in English terminology. Charya means in English terminology they are called as marlon. Marlon means these are the structures, solid structures, structures with a design. And jangya means the arrow holes or the loopholes in the tatabandi or in the curtain wall. So this is the basic model of rather a schematic diagram of a ground fort in our own terms or in our own Indian context. And this will give you a broad idea of the various terminology which is being used. Now, moving to the next slide. Now, first, before moving to the actual terminology and their role in defense mechanisms, let us try to understand the decisive factors impacting the fort architecture. This is very important because these factors decide the structures on the fort actually. Now, the first factor which I would like to discuss is the site. Site is also called as the sentry of security, and the term itself is self-explanatory. On the left side, you can see the hill fort. It is the Rajgarh. The view has been taken from the top. And on the bottom side, on the right side, you can see the view of drone view of Sindhudurga Fort, which is an island fort. Now here you can see that Sindhudurga Fort, the entire island has been fortified. Not a single piece of land has been left alone or without fortification. The entire island has been fortified. Why it is done? We are going to see it in the next slide. Now, any good fort architecture from simplest to most complicated is based upon the selection of the site of a fort. For example, if it is a hilly fort or surrounded by a river like or a sea like here in Sindhudurga, and if it is a lofty fort like a Rajgarh on the left corner, you can see the garrison in a fort on a high hill always has got an advantage of fight against the invaders. Now, when the garrison is sitting on the top, what happens? And if that fort has got natural fortification, strong, and the what I would say the heighted cliffs, as you can see over here in Rajgarh, it has got a natural fortification. So in this case, you don't need to erect a artificial fortification. The cliff, the high cliff, the height itself is the natural fortification to the fort. So such cases, such sites will not demand much fortification to the fort, and with crude weapons like even the stones or the boiling water, these crude weapons can prove fatal to the enemy. Rajgarh and Raigad are the best examples of the of this type of forts or the hill forts. Now, if the site is an isolated island, for example, Sindhudurga Fort in this slide. Now you can see the Sindhudurga Fort is surrounded by sea water from all the side, and this sea water itself acts like a moat. You have a moat around, as I told you earlier. You have a moat which is very essential for a ground fort. Now, in this case, the sea itself acts like a moat for this island fort. So the site is very important. Now, going to the next slide, here I would like to tell you how the site is important in these cases. Now, for example, on the right side, you can see Devgarh Fort. Devgarh Fort, it is a coastal fort. It is surrounded by sea from two sides, and it is connected with the land from one side. You can call it as a Mishra Durga also. Now, in case of such coastal fort, for example, Vijay Durga or this Devgarh Fort, the moat becomes a must for protecting the flank of fort because it is directly connected to the ground. And in case of Mishra Durga, on the left side, you can see Devgiri Fort. You can see the two pictures of Devgiri Fort. One is a drone view and one is the taken from the other side. So in case of Mishra Durga, like Devgiri, which is a combination of a ground hill and the hill, you can see a hill fort over here, and this is a ground fort. So it's a combination. So in this case also, a moat is a very essential part of the fortification. And in that context, you can see all around the fort of Devgiri, a ditch has been created, or a khandak, or the moat has been created. In this picture also, you can see this deep. This is very deep. This must be around 50 feet deep, and it could be around 80 to 100 feet wide. So such a huge deep has been created just to have an additional defense to the main entrance of the fort. So this is a very must in case of ground fort as well as a fort like Devgiri, which is a combination fort. So a moat is a very must. And this is how the site of a fort determines the scope of fortification and fort architecture. Now, the above examples which I showed you, Devgiri, Devgarh, and Sindhu Durga as well as Rajgarh, this will help you to understand how the site of a fort leads to classification of forts also. So if it is situated on in a hill, it becomes a hill fort. If it is on an island like Sindhu Durga, it becomes an island fort. And if it is ground, it becomes a ground fort like Parinda, then Ausa. These are all ground forts. So the site decides the classification of fort also. So these are the very important aspect of forts and fortification, and this is a factor which is a decisive while making a fort architecture or constructing the monuments or the defense mechanisms on a fort. Now, another factor, the second factor is water, of course. While building a fort, if after the site selection, the most important part is the source of water. Suppose source of water is not available, you have to abandon the fort. This is the very practical and the basic, I would say, the requirement or the criteria while building a fort. So this water is a very decisive factor. The site which has been selected by the ruler must be self-sufficient in supply of water. Now, in case of Maharashtra, as I mentioned you earlier, in Maharashtra, you find most of the forts are the hill forts. And these hill forts being on the top of the hill, they have ample, what I would say, the source of rainwater. So around 250 inches of rain falls average. Of course, this is the average rainfall in a season. And uninterrupted water supply is available on these forts. But still, the numerous reservoirs and rock-cut water cisterns are constructed on hill forts. For example, you can see over here, this is the Fort Raigad, and this is the famous Ganga Sagar Talab. And these are the water cisterns which have been generated in rock. These are the rock-cut water cisterns. The third, this is the Sanjeevani Machi of Rajgarh, and in this Machi also a rock-cut water cistern is created. So it is estimated how important it is for Raigad, for example, for a fort like Raigad. Raigad being the royal capital of Hindu Swarajya. Around 10,000 garrison was there. It is one estimate says that 10,000 or 5 to 10,000 garrison was there. Plus royal family of Shivaji Maharaj was staying there. So the need of water was huge. And it is said that around 20 lakhs of liters of storage of water was there available in forms of various reservoirs, water cisterns, rock cut, I would say, water tanks. It was available on the fort. So water is very important for building a fort, and without water, you can't defend a fort. So because of the availability of ample supply of water, it will enhance the staying capacity and defending power of the inhabitants to a great extent. So this is the second factor that decides the fort architecture. The third factor, it is said that garrison marches on stomach. This is a very famous phrase, garrison marches on stomach, or we say that in Marathi, we say that Sainya potavar chal. Apart from sight and the water, another important factor in effective protection of fort is the availability of adequate supply of food. There is a famous phrase, as I mentioned, garrison marches on stomach. So it is a vital element, especially during a siege by the enemy. And when your logistics and supply from outside is cut off, the storage of food and fodder is very important. To counter the threat of such blockades, the garrison started using these ample storage of food, fodder, and ammunition. Now, in view of this, storage places were created, which are known as granaries for storing of food, and ammunition depot, which is called as magazine in fort terminology. Now, magazine is a Portuguese word. Even citadel is a Portuguese word. So the best example of granary is found on Panhala Fort near Kolhapur. Many of you must have visited this fort and you must have visited this site also. There are three huge granaries. They are known as Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati. They are still in good condition and they are very well preserved in on Panhala Fort. And as you must have seen, they are with the huge capacity. So remains of granaries can be seen on Raigad Fort also. Now, the most important part is on the right side, you can see a schematic diagram of how the granaries must be functioning. Now, you can see there are three holes on the top, on the rooftop. This is just a schematic diagram. Not exactly every time you have three holes. Depending on the capacity of the granary, you have the number of holes created on the top. So there are three huge holes on the top, which are used to drop the grain bags in the godown. So from the top, the grain bags are dropped and stored in the inside the room of this granary. And whenever the grain bags are required, whenever it is required to be fetched, it is fetched from this door, which is at the bottom. So this is a simple mechanism of a granary, how it works. You must have seen this granary, these three granaries, Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati. And if you have visited on the rooftop of these buildings, you can see these three huge holes. And then you will realize what is the purpose of these three holes. So it is for dropping the grain bag. So this is nothing but the granary, which is very essential. And next is your, apart from food and fodder, ammunition is also required to defend the food. Now, what are the constructions? This is a magazine or a daru kotha, the ammunition depot. This is a well-preserved ammunition depot or a magazine which you can see if you visit a Sinhagad fort. And on the bottom side, you can see a very well-preserved and recently renovated, I would say, a magazine or a daru kothar on the Shivdi fort, which is in Mumbai itself. So this is a very well-maintained magazine on Sinhagad fort, and it will give you an idea of how it is constructed, the thickness of the walls, and the shape of the rooftop. So these are very important depending on the capacities, the requirement of the granaries, and as well as the ammunition depot. So basically now we have seen three prime factors that decide the fortification. One is the site, one is the availability of water, and third is the food and fodder storage. So magazine as well as the granaries are very important. Now, with this knowledge, now let us go to the actual terminology of a fort. What is the fort terminology? And we'll see few of the terminologies. The first one is, of course, the entrance gateways to the fort. Now, every fort, whenever it is built with an entrance or a gateway. Every fort must have an entrance or a gateway. The entrance to the fort or the gateway is, of course, the weakest point of the whole defense system, because whenever an invading enemy, when they are besieging the fort, all their focus is on the gateways. They try to enter, they try to squeeze through the gate. So the first battle that happens is always at the gate, and gate is the weakest portion of the fort, because all the load, all the resistance that has to be offered to the enemy has to be concentrated at the gate. So gate is the weakest, I would say, a piece of fort or in the defense line. And because of this importance, the attention, due attention, or rather the great attention was given to the defense of approach or the entrance of the fort. For example, in case of the hill forts, now on the left side you can see the this curtain wall of the Raigad, which we have seen in the last time also. It is on the midway of the height of the fort, Raigad Fort. Here is the main entrance, the Bale Killa, which is of Gomukhi type of the style of the fort of the gateway. And you have learned in the last lecture itself that it was carefully designed. The pathway to the Mahadarwaza or the main gate entrance was carefully designed. Why it was carefully designed? Because in case of a hill fort like Raigad, you have the advantage of height and a vertical fall of a hill on the other side. So this helped to for a careful carving of a path to the gateways. Now, in case of Raigad or such hill forts, this approach to the gate was cut into a form of narrow, steep, zigzag path with as many as hairpin bends as possible. Now you just try to visualize if you have already visited Raigad Fort and if you have climbed the fort from the steps, you must try to visualize the situation at the main entrance. The entire path to the Raigad main entrance is narrow, steep, and it is zigzag and with many hairpin bends. And this is the main function of the hill fort. So the best example, as I mentioned you, it is found on Raigad, and we have discussed it at length about this main entrance in the last lecture. Now, in case of Shivneri, you have seven series of entrances. Seven series of entrances. Although it is a hill fort, it has got a seven gates, one after the other. So you have seven gates on Shivneri. Now, in case of Lohgad, so the following the bottom pictures, both the pictures of Lohgad, and in case of Lohgad, multiple entrances one after the other are created. Now, why it was created? What is the impact of it, and what is the feature of this kind of complicated entrance to the Lohgad fort? The purpose of such arrangements was to make difficult for the invaders to break through the defenses of the gate before they could reach to the top. So a complicated entrance was created at the Lohgad fort. There are about 3 to 4 series of gates, one after the other, and the last gate is of course the Mahadarwaza, which is the main entrance. But before that, you have to break through the defenses of 3 to 4 gates, which are very well, I would say, arranged on the ascent of the fort. So it is like a complicated entrance. Now, in case of Lohgad, what happens is it will be clear from the picture that whenever the orientation of these gates is such a way that the garrison sitting on the top, a garrison or the insider who is sitting on the top can see every single enemy stepping up on the approach path. Whenever the enemy is on the first step itself, it is clearly visible to the person sitting on the top, and it can fire various projectiles, and it can fire gunshot, it can throw an arrow, whatever. So every person, in case of Lohgad, the arrangement, the orientation of these gates is made in such a way that every person stepping on the first step itself is clearly visible to the insider sitting behind the curtain walls on the top, and they can have an actual, I would say, a virtual tour of that invader or the enemy. They can watch his second to second progress on the ascent. So this is a very complicated yet a useful creation of the gateways in case of Lohgad. So entrance to the gateways is very important, and both these pictures are of Lohgad. Lohgad is very close to Pune, and many people must have gone to Lohgad. Now, whenever you visit Lohgad, do try to go on the top and look down, and you can see every step coming up is under the scanner of a person sitting on the top. So this is a very peculiar arrangement and orientation of the gateways on a hill fort like Lohgad. Now, as I mentioned, Shivneri has got seven, one after the other, seven gates in a series. Now we discussed about, initially we discussed about the hill forts. Now coming to the land forts or the ground forts. Land forts and ground forts, they don't have an advantage of height. So it is very critical how you design and how you defend a gateway. Now, it is very different. The design element in case of entrances to the ground fort is very different than the hill forts. Since ground fort do not have an advantage of height or the arduous approach to the top, the gates are most vulnerable in case of a ground fort. So, therefore, in land forts, more than one gates are created, and they are placed in such a manner that once you enter through one gate, the other gate is not exactly opposite to it. It is not like a series. It is not like a train, coaches. It is like it is the you don't find that once you enter the first gate, exactly opposite to that in front of you, the other second gate is there, third gate is there. It is not created like that. You have 3 to 4 gates inside, but they are created in a different manner. Once you enter the first gate, the second gate is either on the left side or on the right side. Now on the top, you can see 1, 2, 3. These are the 3 different gates or the gateways to the Bidar Fort. Bidar Fort is in Karnataka and it is very near to Solapur also. And this is the first gate, the second gate, and the third gate. They are one after the other, but they are not exactly opposite to each other or in a series. Once you enter the first, the next is or either to the left or to the right. So what happens because of this? What happens because of this? The approach to the next succeeding gate is not straight either, but in spiral way. So the person who is entering, the enemy who enters the first gate is again under a constant scanner and fire from the insiders who is sitting behind the curtain. So this is very important. Once you enter the first gate, you get little confused as to where the second gate is there. And during the entire course, you are under constant vigil from the people who are sitting behind the curtain. So this is a very peculiar design of gateways to the land fort. And because of the vulnerability of the gates of land forts, many artificial obstacles and mechanical barriers are also created. We are going to see about those mechanical barriers and obstacles in the next few slides. So this is something about the Bidar Fort. The top 3 pictures are of the Bidar gateways. You can see that there are various ornamental structures on the top also. It is called as a mechanicalization. So we are going to discuss about it in the latter stage of the lecture. The 3 pictures on the lower portion of the slide, these are the pictures of Nal Durga Fort. Again, the first entrance, then the second entrance, and the third entrance. They are placed in a zigzag manner. There is a spiral way. You have to take a spiral route if you want to reach inside the fort. And during that spiral route, you are always under fire from the top. Rather the persons behind the curtain ropes. So this is a very peculiar design of a gateway to the land fort. Now let us see some of the plans. This picture will make you clear how the gates of the land forts are created and they are placed. Left side, you can see this is the Vijapur fort. This is a plan of the entrance to the Vijapur fort. This is the main entrance, and once you enter the main entrance, there are 2 bastions here. There will be continuous insiders on the bastions, and they will throw many projectiles on you. Inside courtyard, which is very open, it is called as Barbican, and in our language we call it as Radamandal. Now, once you enter this, you have another gate, and there is a spiral way inside. There is a spiral way in the inner court, and here you get a final entry to the fort. So for entering into the fort, you have 1, 2, and 3 gateways which are placed in a zigzag manner. Right side, you can see the plan of Fateh Gate in Bidar. You saw in the earlier picture the 3 slides of the 3 gateways of the fort, and here is the plan. Of course, you can see the moat is there around the fort. Moat is there around the fort, which is a very essential part of fortification. This is the entrance. There is a drawbridge which can be removed or which can be placed on the moat for the entry. Once you enter the first gate, this is Barbican or the Ranamandal. Now, again, you have to take a left turn. And coming here, the invader gets confused as to where the exact the next door is placed. He is under constant threat of fire from the insiders. Here is the second gate, and once you cross this, there is a third gate. So these are the few plans of the gateways of the land force, and which will give you a fair idea of how the design of the gateway was done and how their orientation is actually in the while building where the orientation is maintained while building the force. So this is a typical, I would say, a plan of a layout of a gateway. Now coming to the next slide. Uh, Now we are concentrating on a single gateway. Earlier we saw how the designs of the gateways or the path to the entry was designed or was made in for the land force or the ground force. Now you can see a typical design of a gateway. On the right side in the yellow lines, you can see I think the lines are not clearly visible, but I can tell you this is a typical design of a gateway. For a gate, you have got two panel of the wooden gates. Then there is a small over here, a small portion of the gate. If you have a proper permission to enter, you can show that permission to the people who are taking care of the door. And if your permission is valid, you don't have to open the entire door. The small portion is opened, which is called as postern, or in our language, we call it as Dindi Darwaza. Many of the forts, ground forts or to the even hill forts, you can see this Dindi Darwaza. It is a very small version of the door. And you have to, it is open because otherwise the entire gate, which is a very huge, on the left side, you can see a huge gate over here. It is wooden in structure. And here is the Dindi Darwaza or the small gate for the entry of a person in the fort. Now, these are the two panels of the wooden gate. Uh, on the top of the gate, many times you must have seen there are sculpted figures. They are called as Durga Dwara Shilpa in Marathi, and there are spikes also studded. The door panels are studded with spikes. On the top, there is one construction which is a peculiar English construction or the Western terminology. It is called as machicolation. We don't have a parallel word in our terminology. And on the top, there is a Nagarkhana. If you remember, many of you must have visited Raigad Fort, and the entry to the royal court is through the Nagarkhana. That building is called as Nagarkhana. The actual building is not Nagarkhana, but the Nagarkhana is placed on the top. So this construction you can see in case of Raigad. So this is a very typical picture of a gate, a schematic diagram. Now, next one. Now, let us see the augmented gateway designs. As I mentioned you earlier, the entrance of a land fort is the most vulnerable part of the fort. An additional element of protection for the gate was very much required to protect the fort. So one such feature is nothing but the moat. In Persian language, or the other language we call it as khandak, and the parallel word suggested by Shivaji Maharaj in Durga Vyavahar Kosh is parikha. So here you can see three examples of a moat. On the top, this is a Vellore fort, which is in Tamil Nadu. This is on the right is Ahmednagar fort, which is in Maharashtra, and this is a very peculiar type of fort having three sets of I would say moats. This is nothing but the Patiala fort in Punjab. So these are the three examples which I want to quote. Now, what is a moat? Moat is a European term, while it is known as Khandak in our language, and Shivaji Maharaj described it as Parikha. A moat is a wide and deep trench around the periphery of the fort, filled with either water or spikes or thorny shrubs. In this picture, you can see trenches around the Vellore fort and Ahmednagar fort. Today also they are filled with water. Some of the forts, ground forts, even have three consecutive moats, as you can see over here in case of Patiala, 1, 2, 3. So you have to pass through, you have to break through the defenses of the three moats, and then you get a final entry to the Patiala fort. So this is how the moat is constructed in land forts. Now, a drawbridge. There is a moat, and for the entry you need a passage. This passage is nothing but the gateway to the drawbridge to the main entrance. So these are the remains of a drawbridge in Ahmednagar Fort. Of course, these are not built in Shivaji Maharaja's period, but these are probably this is a construction in the British rule when the fort was under British rule. They had created this drawbridge. Remains of drawbridge can be seen in Devgiri Fort also. Nowadays, they have created a iron drawbridge on the khandak or the moat, which helps you to enter the main fort or the citadel. So Devgiri has such type of drawbridge. This is a good example of moat and a drawbridge, which is today also which can be seen in Ahmednagar Fort. So even Fort of Jinji in the state of Tamil Nadu has a similar gateway, but it is, mind it well, it is on the citadel. It is not on the ground, it is on the citadel. So this is how the moat was created around the citadel also. And to enter that citadel, in case of Jinji Fort, which is in Tamil Nadu, they had created a drawbridge. So this is an augmented design which is helpful to make the defense, enhance the defense of a gateway. Now, the third term, which is very peculiar kind of construction. This is only seen in case of Indian subcontinents, particularly in case of Maharashtra, when the people had created ground forts. When the cannons were introduced, of course, the cannons made the made the gateways most vulnerable. And to protect the gateways and to protect from the cannons, this kind of fortification, which is known as Sher Haji or GB, was introduced. Now, what is a Sher Haji? Now, in case of Gulbarga or Kalburgi Fort, Gulbarga is a district place. Nowadays, it is called as Kalburgi. There is a ground fort or a land fort there. It's a huge fort having many cannons on the top of the bastions. So this is the main curtain wall. Outside the curtain wall, you can see a tatabandi or a rampart wall or a curtain wall, which is with a having a smaller height than the main curtain. So what is the purpose of this curtain wall? The purpose of this curtain wall is to give additional protection to the main curtain wall from the cannons. Now, in case of Ahmednagar Fort, on the right side, you can see this is the main gate, and this gate you can see it's studded with spikes. In front of this main gate, they have created a small piece of wall, which is known as Sher Haji or Jipi, or it is also called as Hastinap. This terminology you will not find in English literature or in English terminology. In their context, basically they are castles, but they have not created this kind of fortification. In case of land forts in Maharashtra particularly, you can find this type of protective walls. So this wall, this small wall in front of the gate, it acts like a curtain. It acts like a curtain, and because of it, the besiegers or the invaders, they don't get a direct view of the gate, which is the main portion, which is the weakest portion rather of the entire fort. So this is nothing but the Sher Haji. So whenever you visit the forts of Gulbarga, Ahmednagar, and even to Ausa, Paranda, you can see this type of structures over there. Sher Haji. Sher Haji, even in many land forts, this is properly visible. So Sher Haji is a very important, I would say, a feature of fort terminology or of fortification. Now here is a plan of various types of Sher Hajis, which is still visible. On the right side, this is a Govardhan fort. Here, this is the main entrance. There are two bastions supporting the defense of the fort, and just to give an additional protection to the main entrance, because this is vulnerable, cannons can hit the door. So they have created a wall over here, additional wall over. So this is in Golconda. Similarly, here you can see in the Delhi fort, Red Fort. This is the main entrance, and they have created a L-shaped additional wall in front of the gate. In Naladurga also it is visible. It is seen today also. And the most important factor is, if you try to break the defenses of this Sher Haji, you have to take a right turn over here. And once you enter this, you are again under scanner or fire from both the sides, or rather from all the sides of the fort from inside. So this is in case of Kalburgi or Gulbarga Fort, Ahmednagar Fort, or for that matter, Ausa, Parinda, which are all ground forts. The type of the fort is land forts. But astonishingly, if you are visiting Shivneri Fort, Shivneri, the fifth or the sixth, I don't remember the exact number, but fifth or the sixth gate, which is called as Hatti Darwaza, in front of Hatti Darwaza, they have created a wall. Now this wall is in broken stage as of today. This wall is nothing but Sher Haji, and this is the main Hatti Darwaza, fourth or the fifth gate, the gate of the Shivneri Fort. And in front of this, this is the protection wall they have created. So this gives an additional protection to the main entrance. And from behind this wall, you can defend the fort. You can throw projectiles on the outsiders. So this is an additional element of protection, which is called as Sher Haji or Jibi in our languages. So now the next one, battlement. Battlement is a very important term. Battlement consists of very many features. To enhance the defense of gateways, various supportive structures, as I mentioned earlier, they could be ornamental structures also. Supportive structures are in the fortifications are created. They are called as battlements. Now, what are the battlements? Various types of supportive structures. Let us try to understand. The battlements comprises of a parapet. Over here, you can see a parapet. We call it as fanji. In our terminology, we call it as fanji, or a parapet. In simple words, you can understand the meaning of it. In which now this parapet has got a wall in which you can see at lower levels and regular intervals, gaps are created. Here you can see the gaps are created. In this picture also, this is a schematic or a cutaway view of a castle wall. Here, this is the parapet. This is the parapet or wall walk or fanji, you can call it as. And you can see gaps at regular intervals are created. So, what is the use of these gaps? This allows a defender to launch arrows or projectiles on the invaders. So battlement walls are made up of stone. These battlements walls are made up of stone. In the cutaway, in the cross section, you can see they are made up of stone, and they are thinner than the main curtain wall. A parapet or a fanji, what is the exact meaning of it? Parapet or a fanji is nothing but a low wall or railing along the edge of a curtain. Now the gaps which are created in the parapet, they are called as crenelles or embrasures. Here you can see the crenelles, the number, these are the gaps in the battlement. They are called as crenelles or embrasures. We don't have a parallel word in our terminology. We don't have a parallel word in our terminology. Now, adding gaps, the process of adding gaps in the battlement is called as crenellations. Crenellations is nothing but adding gaps in the battlements. And in the battlement, there is one more feature which is called as marlon or fanji in charya in our own language. This structure, solid structure, number 2, or here, this is called as charya. This is an ornamental structure. It is a pointed structure. This is called as marlon or charya. What is the purpose of marlon? Why it is created in the battlement? It is a solid part of parapet which provides cover. It provides cover to the archer and garrison inside during firing. They can hide behind this cover or the charya, and they can throw a gunshot on the invaders, or they can throw projectiles or the arrows on the enemy, which is accumulated down below the battlement or the curtain wall. So nothing but you can say that the spaces between two marlons is nothing but the crenelles. So these are the charya or the I would say the marlons, and the spaces between the marlons is nothing but embrasures or crenelles. So these are the schematic diagrams which will give you an idea of what is a charya, what is a fanji, or marlon, crenelles, and machicolation. Machicolation, we'll talk about it in a later stage. So this is charya, this is the fanji or the parapet, this is the the staircase, and this is nothing but the marlons. So these are the schematic diagrams. Now let us see the actual diagrams. Here On the left side, you can see the battlement of Naladurga Fort. These gaps, as shown by the arrows, they are called as embrasures. Merlons are nothing but the solid portions which can be used as a hide for a insider to throw arrows. This is the Bidar Fort, the Bidar Fort battlement on the Fateh Gate. This is Udgir Fort near Latur, and you can see a design of the Charyas also. And this is Padmadurga Fort. Padmadurga Fort, which is an island fort exactly opposite to the Murud Janjira near the coast of Murud in Konkan. And this was built by Shivaji Maharaj. And now you can see over here the pointed charyas, merlons. These are the pointed charyas. In case here, we don't have gaps. But in the some of the constructions in the land forts, you have gaps for firing. This is parapet. This is nothing but the parapet or the fanji or the pathway. This is so wide that even two bullock carts at a time can be run on the parapet. So these are the charyas or the merlons or the crenelles, embrasures, which are the features of a battlement or the fortification of the gateways. So they are very important for the defense of a gate. Now, another feature of the battlement is loopholes or arrow slits. This is a very important feature. We call it a jangya in our terminology. Now, what is arrow slit? In the battlement, many times you see holes or slits. These are the holes from inside. This is the picture of the hole which is taken from the inside. A person is sitting inside and he is taking the picture. The same has been taken from the outside. So from outside, the slit or the gap looks like this. This is known as arrow hole or the jangya. Okay. It is a narrow vertical aperture in fortification through which an archer can launch arrows or fire a gunshot. The interior wall behind an arrow loop are often cut away at an oblique angle to have a wide field of view and wide field of fire. So here are the various types of loopholes or arrow slits or the jangyas. This is the cross section. This is a typical sketch of a jangya. Here you can see a vertical cross section is shown over here. This is one opening window. This is another opening window. These two windows are seen over here. How they look like, their cross section is like this. This is a slightly inclined. This is for nothing but it is used for muskets, the long barrels of the gun. This is for throwing the arrows. Here, a horizontal cross section is taken, and you can see the cross section over here, and these are the gaps which are called as loopholes or arrow slits. This is another vertical cross section of this slit, and it looks like it has gotten long and inclined slit, which is used for muskets, throwing a gunshot on the invaders. So these are the various types of loopholes which are an important part of the fortification. Now, the next one, another aspect of the gateway fortification. It is again an augmented additional design which is required for a gateway. It is known as machicolation, and the another term is bartizan. Both machicolation and bartizan are purely European concepts. Now, what is machicolation? Machicolation is a defensive feature built into tall towers or gatehouses. This is the main entrance of the Solapur Fort. This is the Solapur Fort entrance. This is the Bidar Fort entrance. Both are the ground forts. And this is the structure which is known as machicolation. What is machicolation? As I mentioned, it is a defensive feature built in the towers or the gatehouses. It is nothing but a floor opening between the supporting corbels. Corbels, what is corbel? Corbels are nothing but the brackets which support this structure. These are the corbels. So this is the floor opening between the supporting corbels of a battlement through which stones or boiling water, hot cooking oil, hot sand can be dropped on the attackers at the base of a defensive wall at the gate. So this is the purpose of a machicolation. Machicolation is a purely, as I said, it is a European concept, but it has been adopted in many land forts because it is a must. it gives an additional, I would say, support to the gateway. Here is a schematic diagram on the top, and you can see all the terminologies what we have discussed. Corbel is nothing but the supporting bracket. This is the Marlon. This is the Marlon, the Charia, solid portion, loophole, the slit holes, and the embrasures or the gaps. Okay. So this is the schematic diagram of matriculation or the gateway augmented designs. Uh, so because of its active presence, now what happens? A matriculation acts like a visible deterrent to the attackers, because what happens is once the presence of matriculation and insiders is felt by the enemies, they will not dare to break open the door, and even they will not try to burrow beneath the tower, because some presence of insiders is there, and they can throw projectiles, they can counter attack on the attackers. So there, it's like a deterrent presence of the matriculation, which is very important. Now on the right side, you can see partisan. Partisan again, as I mentioned, uh, yeah. I think I will, yeah, I will summarize in next 5 minutes, right? Now, partisan is a wall-mounted turret, and it has got projecting outside from the walls of a rampart wall or a curtain. And these are the typical designs, the Portuguese designs of a partisan. You can see this partisan only in Shirgaon Fort, which is near Mahim, Palghar, in the district of Palghar. It's a land fort, small fort. On one of the peripheries of the curtain walls, you can see such partisan. But this is basically a European style of architecture. Now, the different types of bastions. Bastions, as you know, they are nothing but the burrows. I will not go into the details or the definition of a bastion. You are all aware of bastion. Bastion basically gives an enhancement to the defense wall, and it avoids or it restricts the defense wall from breaking, because it is an additional protection to the curtain wall. Now there are three types of bastions found in various terminologies. This is the squarish bastion, which is found in English style of architecture. Portuguese have polygonal bastions, and the Maratha kind or the Indian type of bastions are circular. Examples are given. English type, you can see a Constantinople, Turkey. This is the Constantinople wall. The small remains of Constantinople wall are there. You can see the squarish bastions there. They are all European or English type of bastions. Naladurga Fort, which is very close to Solapur. It is on the border of Maharashtra and Karnataka. At the entrance, this main tower, the gate tower, is multi angle, or the, I would say, polygonal type of bastion. Again, another portion of this Naladurga Fort, which is called as Ranamandal, it has got a huge heighted tower, which is again a circular. So these are basically three bastions which are found in the military architecture. Typical ornamental kind of bastions. This is Nauburji. You can see it is made up of 9 petals of a lotus. So it is called as Nauburji or Pakali Burus. This is the schematic diagram of Nauburji or ornamental fortification. Another kind of fortification, a bastion, the ornamental bastion is found in case of Maharashtra, is the Padmadurga Fort. It is called as Pakali Burus. The shape is like a lotus. So Padmadurga name has been derived from that. Padmadurga, why it is called as Padmadurga? This is an island fort which was built by Shivaji Maharaj. Because of this bastion, which is made in a kind of ornamental structure, and it appears like a fully grown up petal lotus. So it is called as a Padmadurga. So this is a ornamental type of I would say bastions. Nauburji, which has got 9 petals in Naladurga, and of course the Padmadurga fort. Going forward, multi-storied bastions. In some of the forts, in the ramparts or the curtain walls, you see multiple multi-storied bastions. This is Vijayadurga Fort. It is said that this is the 3-storied bastion. This is the famous Janjira Fort. Here is the main entrance to the fort. And you can see there are 4 to 5 stories of the huge structure over here, bastions, because it gives an advantage of height. So same way in Padmadurga also you can see a heighted tower. It is a multiple story type of bastion. So these are the various types of bastions. Bastion is not only defined by the shape, it is defined by the purpose also. So this is made in multi-story bastions. Next is a solitary bastion. This is found in Naladurga. It is called as Uplaya Buruj. It is solitary. It has got a height which is more than the curtain wall. Of course, the purpose is to have a control over the large area, surrounding area. They have put a battery of cannons on the top, and it is inside the fort. It is not part of the main fortification. So it is called as a Uplaya Buruj or a solitary bastion. So this is a very much feature of a Naladurga fort. You have to climb around 100 to 150 steps to reach to the top, and on the top there are the designs are like that. You can place cannons on the top. The second one over here, this is a very peculiar kind of fort, and this is found in Mirzan, Gokarna. Again, this has got a solitary, separate bastion. It is called as Uplaya Buruj. This is a armored bastion. It is a two-layer fortification. This is Lohagad bastion. This is the last bastion of the Vinsukata Machi. And you can see this is the main top portion of the bastion. For additional protection, and a wall is created over here. It is like armor which is put on the back of a elephant. So this is called as a armored bastion. The functioning of the purpose of the armored bastion is clearly visible on the left schematic diagram. So this is a similar armored bastions are found in the Suveda Machi, Sanjeevani Machi of Rajgarh fortification. But to have a different example, I have purposely put a picture of Lohagad fort. This is the spearhead bastion. This is a very peculiar kind of architecture of the English kind of fortification. This is the Varali fort in Mumbai. Varali fort is there. It has got a spearhead bastion, and shape is like a spearhead. The another typical, very unique kind of construction is a roundel. Roundel is a round kind of bastion, and the purpose is to have heavy cannons placed on the top. So this is a roundel fort, and this is a very European structure. This Mirzan fort, after Tipu Sultan, it was in the hands of French. So French people have renovated it, and they have built this roundel type of fort. Now, the last one, the Mortello Tower. Mortello Tower is a very unique kind of feature. This picture, what you see, is nothing but the island of Arnala. It is near Vasai Virar. This Arnala is island fort. It is surrounded by seawater from all sides. The peculiarity is that the entire in the previous pictures, if you remember, I had shown you the picture of Sindhudurga fort. The entire Sindhudurga island was fortified, but this particular Arnala island, it is fortified in a very small place. This is the actual Arnala fort. The entire island is not fortified. So to have additional protection, they have built a solitary bastion on the seashore. This is called as a Mortello Tower. You have only one example of this Mortello Tower in entire Maharashtra, and that is that can be seen on the Arnala fort or the Arnala seashore. This is the this is the actual picture of the this bastion, which is known as Mortello Tower. This is a zoom picture of Mortello Tower. It is again a bastion or small fortification. You can have 10 to 15 garrison inside. You can have two to three strong cannons on the top. So this was and the last, of course, this is the citadel. We have talked about it in the last lectures also. Topmost portion of the fort, which we used to call it as Balekilla, but Shivaji Maharaj introduced our own word, the Sanskrit word, which is known as Upatyaka, and the Machi, or this is the top Balekilla, and the plateau below the topmost portion, citadel, the plain portion is known as Machi. This Machi is nothing but the Sanjeevani Machi. Here also you can see Sanjeevani Machi. It is fortified. It has got a double walled fortification. So again, this is a unique feature of Shivaji's genius, Shivaji Maharaj's genius of art of fortification. So this is citadel, which is known as Upatyaka, and Machi, which was called as Adityaka. These are purely again our own words designed by Shivaji Maharaj in his Rajya Vyavhar Kosh. So this was the last slide, and now I will conclude this entire lecture. While summing up, now I hope you have all liked this information, and I urge you all from here onwards, please remember that, please remember these terms and these terms, and whenever you happen to visit any of these forts next time, you try to remember this. When you visit a fort, all over you see dilapidated monuments, ruins all over, but every stone of these buildings has got a meaning. It is raised with a purpose. It is not just that they have put a wall or constructed any structure. It is not like that. It is with the purpose. So the objective behind the purpose, now you are very well aware, because now you know the fortification terminology, why it is created, what are the different defensive mechanisms, augmented defense designs, the gateways, the citadels, then the granaries, all these constructions, although they are in ruins as of today, they have got a purpose. And when you visit these places, try to recollect this information. The objective behind the purpose, now you are very well aware. The monuments will tell you the history and the vision of the rulers, the great Shivaji Maharaj. And that, and while visiting this, try to remember this information, and you will have a very good experience of a virtual tour of our glorious past, virtual tour of our history, and you can take inspiration from it. And with this note, I once again thank Sharwari madam, Shukla madam, again Gokhale madam, for giving me an opportunity to talk on a very different perspective of fortification. Generally, this topic is never been taken up. We people don't know. We just know that there are ruins on the forts, but why they are created, what was the purpose, and what was the vision behind creating these monuments. It is very important, and it is called as fort terminology. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So perhaps, sir, maybe you can stop sharing.
Yeah.
So perhaps,
I hope I have concluded within a stipulated time frame. It is 1 hour and 15 minutes.
yes, sir. Sir, thank you so much for really enlightening us on this kind of terminologies. And I'm very sure that whenever participants are visiting the forts in India, they will definitely, get benefited, and at least they will start thinking on that line. That is very, very important. And I can clearly see the immense amount of efforts you might have taken while preparing the slide. A lot of research has gone in that I could clearly see through your slides. And thanks for accepting our invitation and coming online. We are really looking forward to have many more such kind of sessions.
Sure.
And the IKS initiatives as per the national education policy. So thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to all the participants for staying with us and then getting benefit of these kind of sessions. Thank you so much.